Hey guys, I'm filming from a different angle today. I kind of regret it now because you can totally see how messy my room is behind me over there. But, you know, whatever. Who cares? This angle, I guess, is a lot easier for me to set up and get the focus and stuff good. So I'm gonna try it for now. I like it, it's not bad. It's also really distracting because I can see my Twitter feed going just like right there. So, anyway. So this video is about my experience breaking my wrist, more specifically my scaphoid. I'll insert a graphic showing you which bone that is, right here. I broke my scaphoid about 3 months ago, and it's pretty much completely healed now. So I thought I'd give you a little rundown. Maybe if you have a similar experience, leave a comment and tell me what yours was, because I'm sure everyone's is different. And if this is something you're just going through now, maybe it'll help you figure out what to expect. I guess I'll start with how I broke it. It's actually really dumb. I was just walking down the street, well, kind of quickly walking, and I tripped over a crack in the sidewalk. I put my hands out like this to break the fall, and that was that. And the thing that's really weird about my particular experience is I didn't notice it was broken for a few hours, or I didn't even notice anything was wrong at all. When I fell, I cut my foot open, so the immediate kind of response after the accident was to look after that. I was on my way to my friend's house at the time, and as soon as I got there, I went and dealt with my foot while I was kind of like cleaning that up. I started to notice that my wrist was a little bit stiff. I broke the one in my right wrist, which is lucky because I'm left-handed. Anyway, I noticed that it was a bit stiff, but I didn't really think too much of it at the time. It wasn't painful or swollen or anything. So I was hanging out there for a few hours. It started to get more and more like kind of noticeably harder to move, but it still wasn't swollen and it wasn't necessarily painful, but it was just something I was kind of thinking about and I was more aware of. After this, we went out to dinner, and that's when things started getting progressively worse. As the dinner went on, my wrist kept getting more and more swollen, and at this point I was pretty sure I had sprained it. So the dinner went on for a few hours, maybe an hour or two. The waiter brought me a bag of ice, and my wrist kept getting more and more swollen, and it started to hurt a lot. And I couldn't move it at all, pretty much. So after that I knew something was wrong, and lucky for me, the hospital emergency room was about a 10-minute walk away. So I went to the emergency room. Great Friday night. So I went to the emergency room, I registered, I waited in the waiting room for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and then they brought me into this hallway where they said, we'll get you a doctor as soon as one becomes available. I thought, okay, this is going pretty quickly. But no, I was in that hallway for about 2.5 to 3 hours. And where this bench that I was sitting on was in the hallway was right next to where the ambulance like pulls into the hospital. So I saw some scary things in that hallway and heard a lot of screaming. So that was pleasant. Anyway, when they finally addressed me, it was about 11 at night. I had arrived probably 6:30. Anyway, it moved pretty quickly once I saw the doctor. She evaluated my wrist, told me to go get an x-ray, and I did. I waited about 10 minutes outside the x-ray room. They took the x-ray. They said, go back to where you saw the doctor. Waited there for another 10 minutes or so. The doctor came and told me what was going on. She said basically that they think if anything happened, it happened to my scaphoid, which is a bone that it's so small, and based on its positioning in the wrist, it's hard to see if it's broken right away. So what they basically did is said, we're going to put a splint on your wrist, and we will see it, and you'll come back in for another x-ray in about 10 days. So I assumed the splint was just going to be some sort of wrap, but no, it was a full-on cast that covered like my whole thumb and then down like this. It didn't go all the way around, but it was like here and to here. And it went all the way down to my elbow. And then that was wrapped in a bandage. And yeah, that I had to follow basic cast rules, like don't get it wet, keep it elevated, that kind of things. And it was really sore. But anyway, after that I went home. I went back to the hospital 10 days later. They took another x-ray, and I was hoping that it wasn't going to be broken, because 10 days later it wasn't nearly as painful as it had been. It was only painful if I really like wiggled it around really hard, because I could move it around pretty easily inside there. So I went back to the hospital, I had another x-ray, and they discovered that my scaphoid was cracked right into, like right down the middle, vertically. So that was joyful, and they said basically we need to put another cast on, like a full cast this time, and it'll be on there for about 5 weeks. So I was so excited, as you can tell. Then the technician who put the cast on told me I had 2 options. I could get the regular plaster of Paris cast, or I could get a fiberglass cast, which would cost me about $16, I think it was, but like I could submit it for an insurance refund. I asked her which one she recommended, and she said basically if I did the plaster of Paris, then because it would be on for at least 5 weeks, they would have to really, like it would have to be really thick, and that would be really heavy. So she recommended the fiberglass one, so that's what I did. I got a funky blue one. I got to pick a color, and she put it on. If you've never had a cast put on before, it's a really weird experience, because it's very tight on for me on my wrist, and while it's like solidifying, it gets really hot, and it's a very strange, kind of strangely calming experience. The hard thing is keeping it dry. Where I live, it rains a lot, and so whenever I'd have to go outside, I guess I'll tell you, the new cast covered this much, like up to here on my thumb, and then all the way down, and then from about here, and then all the way down to about here. This one was much more comfortable than the temporary cast was, but and it didn't move around at all. I couldn't move my wrist in there one little bit. Showering is difficult, because I had to put a plastic bag over it, and then just like tie it off with a rubber band every time I had a shower. And I could only use one hand to shower, which you don't realize how hard that is until you try it. Just try it next time you're having a shower, to only use one hand. Bottles are hard to squeeze with one hand, and let me tell you, if you ever break a bone in your arm or hand and you can only use one hand in the shower, Lush's solid shampoos and conditioners are going to be your best friend, because you just take the bar and you rub it on your head. Anyway, that's something I discovered and loved. So yeah, I had that cast on for about 5 weeks. Then I went to the hospital, And then they had to remove the cast, which was really scary because they use a saw. My friend Sophie came with me. When I got it removed, she looked like she was about to faint when they pulled out that saw and started sawing my arm. I was just like, well, this has to come off somehow, so I'll let them do it. Anyway, then they took another x-ray, and then I talked to the doctor, and he said basically that it had healed in the middle of the bone, but the edges of the cracks were still like cracked. So they could put some sort of brace or cast on it, or I could just be careful and not really use that arm that much for the next few weeks. I chose the second option because I was done with the casts. So he basically said, don't lift anything heavy and be very careful with twisting. It really puts a lot of pressure on that bone. So avoid that. And he gave me his phone number and said, call me if it gets worse, or if it lasts a really long time. So that was that. Under the cast, like when the cast was removed, my skin under there was very, very dry. It didn't take that long, but I used a lot of moisturizer and exfoliating soap and a bunch of other things to try to get it back to normal looking as soon as possible, because it kind of looked like reptile scales. Anyway, pain-wise, it still hurt when I would bend it really far, or if I would lift anything heavy. And even now, I've had it off for probably 6 weeks or 8 weeks even, and it still doesn't bend as far as the other wrist does. But the doctor said that's totally normal, and it will eventually come back. And even still, lifting heavy things with this hand is difficult. And that's normal. That's not something that really I expected. I assumed that once the cast came off, it was more or less going to be a pretty quick back to normal. And I asked the doctor if he recommended any like physiotherapy, and he said he didn't because just of how physiotherapy is very goal-based, and they say like, we'd like to have you be able to move your wrist this much in this amount of time, and that can really put a lot of strain on a bone that is still healing. So I decided against doing that. So that is basically my experience with my broken wrist. If you've broken any bones, let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm very easy to reach. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanHBP, on YouTube, leave a comment. Vlogmas is coming. I think I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try. I'm committing myself to Vlogmas. I know I've committed myself to Vlogmas the past 2 years. 2 years ago, I really don't have a good excuse, but I made it pretty far into Vlogmas before I stopped doing it. Last year, I have a legitimate excuse. There was no power for a week. It was terrible. But hopefully none of that stuff happens this year, and it's going to be a really good time, and I'm looking forward to making videos again so much. 26th. I might save this video for Vlogmas, so if you're seeing this during Vlogmas, happy Vlogmas. If you're seeing it before Vlogmas, Vlogmas is coming soon. And yeah, that's about it for this video. Thanks for watching, guys.